Guys, have you ever heard about Greek myth? Zeus, Poseidon, and others. Yeah, so today we're gonna tell you more story about them. These chapters are from the book called The Age of Fable. Hope you enjoy.
Chapter 1: The Origin of the Gods. Today, the religions of ancient Greece are extinct. Instead of worshipping the gods or goddesses of Mount Olympus, nowadays people read stories about these mythical characters for entertainment. Although they are ancient, these stories are still valuable. They portray the best and worst of human behavior. These stories provide valuable insight into who we are and why we act as we do. Before earth and sea and heaven were created, all things were gathered in one confused and shapeless mass called chaos. In chaos lived the seeds of all things. The first god to come into existence was Gaia, Mother Earth. No one knows where she came from or how she came into being. As she slept, Gaia gave birth to Uranus, Father Sky. He became her husband, and together they had many children. Their first 3 children were called the 100-handed ones. They were huge, powerful monsters with 50 heads and 100 hands. They were hideous to look at and extremely destructive. They played with earthquakes, thunder, and lightning like toys. And they always fought with each other. The 100-handed ones hated their father, and for this, Uranus decided to push them deep into the earth. He imprisoned them there in a place called Tartarus. Tartarus was also deep underground, that it was even below Hades, the underworld that was formed later as the final destination of the dead. No god, however powerful, could escape this terrible place. After the 100-handed ones, the 3 Cyclops were born. They were huge giants who had only one eye in the middle of their foreheads. One Cyclops represented thunder, another lightning, and the last the lightning bolt. The Cyclops were the first ones to shape metal to make armor and weapons. Uranus feared their power also, and he threw them into Tartarus as well. The third race of beings created by Gaia and Uranus were the Titans. They were born huge and powerful, their elder brothers, but they were not as ugly. There were 12 in number, 6 males and 6 females. The Titans set about creating things like the moon, the seas, mountains, forests, and plains. They married each other and gave birth to the great number of other beings. These children became the lesser gods and goddesses of all the natural features of the earth. For example, the first 2 Titans were Oceanus and Thetis. Oceanus formed the ocean that surrounded the earth. He married his sister Thetis, who gave birth to the 3 great rivers known to the Greeks, including the Nile in Egypt. They also had 3,000 other children. Their sons were called Oceanids, and their daughters were nymphs or Oceanides. Each became the minor god or goddess of a river, stream, spring, lake, or pond. The imprisonment of the 100-handed ones, the Cyclops cursed Gaia. She began to encourage the Titans to rebel against Father Sky. Cronus was the youngest and the bravest of the Titans. He promised his mother that he would defeat his father and free her children. When Uranus spread himself over the earth, Cronus leapt and swung his kite. He seriously wounded Uranus by cutting off a vital organ. This organ fell into the ocean, where it created the goddess of love, Aphrodite. Uranus withdrew the earth, and from that time on, the sky and the earth never touched again. Uranus cursed Cronus, saying that one of Cronus' children would rise up against him, just as Cronus had risen against Uranus. Once Cronus had defeated Uranus, he married his sister Rhea and took his father's throne on Mount Othrys. They gave birth to many children. However, Cronus was cruel to these children because he remembered his father's curse. To prevent his children from revolting against him, he swallowed them as soon as they were born. They were immortal, so they could not die. Instead, they continued to grow within their father. When Rhea was pregnant with her 6th child, she was determined not to let her husband swallow it also. After giving birth to her son, she wrapped a stone in a blanket to give to her husband. Cronus quickly swallowed the stone, but realizing it was not the newborn baby, Rhea hid her son on the island of Crete. She named him Zeus and waited for him to grow up. When Rhea thought Zeus was strong enough to challenge his father, she brought Zeus back to the palace. She gave Zeus a potion to give Cronus. As soon as the king drank it, he began to vomit. One by one, Zeus' older brothers and sisters were thrown from Cronus' heaving mouth. When Cronus realized what was happening, he knew that Zeus was his child. Uranus' curse was coming true. Gasping and weak, Cronus fled to the palace to gather his strength and to call the help from his brothers and sisters. Zeus and his siblings were much bigger than their father's generation. Zeus took them to Mount Olympus to organize a titan named Prometheus joined them. Prometheus' name meant forethought, because he could see the future. He saw that Zeus would win this war. Prometheus advised Zeus to unlock 100-handed ones and the Cyclops from their prison. Zeus threw open the gates of Tartarus and set his uncles free. The 100-handed ones hurled boulders 100 at a time against the Titans. The Cyclops made lightning bolts for Zeus to use as weapons. They also gave Poseidon a magical trident. With it, Poseidon could shake the earth and shatter any object. For Hades, the Cyclops fashioned a helmet that made the wearer invisible. With this weapon and the strength of their new allies, the Olympians won their 10-year war against the Titans. This war was so terrible that it nearly destroyed the war. All-Father Sky became so weak that he was in danger of collapsing into Mother Earth. After the Olympians were victorious, Zeus condemned the Titan at last to support the sky on his shoulders for eternity. Today, Mount Atlas, northwestern Africa, still seem to hold up the sky. Zeus pushed Cronus and his allies, except for Atlas, for of course, in Tartarus he assigned the 100 ones to guard the gates of Tartarus for all time. With the entire world open to them after the war, the Olympians chose the summit of Mount Olympus for their home. Mount Olympus lay in the center of Greece. Some ancient Greeks thought of Mount Olympus as more than a real mountain. They imagined it as a mysterious region far above of all the mountains of the earth. Whenever it was, the entrance to the home of the gods was a great gate of clouds kept by the seasons. Beyond this gate, there were gods dwelling. It was a place for perfect peace. The Greek poet Homer wrote that no wind ever shook the place of Olympus, no rain or snow ever fell there. The cloudless blue heavens stretched around it all the sides, and the yellow glory of sunshine bathed its walls.
Phaeton and the Sun Chariot. Apollo did find many lovers, many of them were mortals, and he had many children. One of his mortal children was a boy named Phaeton. One day, a schoolmate laughed at Phaeton when he said Apollo was his father's. Phaeton, in anger and shame, reported this to his mother. "If," he said, "I am indeed of heavenly birth, give me, mother, some proof of it, and establish my claim to the honor." Phaeton's mother climbed in, stretched her hands toward the skies, and said, "It's not difficult to go and ask Apollo for yourself. The land from where the sun rises lies next to ours." Phaeton heard this with delight. He traveled to India, where the sun rises. Full of hope and pride, he approached the palace of the sun. Apollo's palace stood high on the columns, glittering with gold and precious stones. Climbing Sun advanced up the steep stairs and entered the halls of his father. He approached Apollo, but stopped at a distance, for the light was more than he could bear. Apollo, dressed in a purple robe, sat on a glittering diamond throne. He asked the boy why he had come. Phaeton replied, "O light of the wide world, Apollo, my father, if you permit me to call you that, give me some proof, I beg you, by which I may be known as your son." Apollo told Phaeton to approach and hug him. He said, "My son, you do not deserve to be abandoned. I can confirm what your mother has told you. To put an end to your doubts, ask for whatever you want, and I will give it to you, if it is in my power to grant it. Phaeton immediately asked to drive the chariot of the sun for one day. Apollo quickly wished he had never made such a promise. I spoke without thinking, said Apollo. This is the only request I would deny you. I beg you to change your mind. It is not safe. You are mortal, and you ask for something that is beyond a mortal's power. None but me can drive the flame car of day. Not even Zeus, whose terrible right arm hurls the thunderbolts, can do this. However, Phaeton would not change his mind. With a heavy heart, Apollo at last led the way to the magnificent chariot of the sun. While Phaeton gazed in admiration, the early dawn threw open the purple doors of the east. The path up into heaven was covered with roses. Apollo, when he saw the stars beginning to fade and the earth beginning to glow, ordered the hours to prepare the horses. They obeyed and led the powerful beasts to the chariot. Then Apollo washed his son's face with magical oil. This will protect you from the heat of my crown, which sends forth the light and warmth of the sun, said Apollo. Apollo put the crown on the boy's head and sighed. You must follow my advice, said the sun god. Don't whip the horses. Instead, hold the reins tightly. They so fat enough on their own. You will see the marks of the wheels from where I have gone before, and they will serve to guide you. The confident boy jumped onto the chariot, stood erect, and grabbed the reins with delight. From his mouth poured thanks to his reluctant parent. The horses filled the air with their fierce breath and stamped the ground with impatient hoofs. The bars were let down, and the wide open plain of the universe lay open before them. They darted forward and parted the clouds. Such was their speed that they outran the morning breezes. The horses soon realized that the load they carried was lighter than usual. The chariots would bounce about as if it was empty. The horses rushed full speed up the traveled road. Phaeton became alarmed because he did not know how to guide them. But even if he had known, he did not have the strength. For the first time, the great and little bear was scorched with heat and would have jumped into the sea if it was possible. Knowing whether to pull the reins tight or to throw them away, he had traveled much of the heavy road, but there was still much more to go. He lost all his confidence and began to panic. With terror, he suddenly saw the scorpion extending its two great arms and long poison-tipped tail. When Phaeton got closer, he smelled the poison and saw the menace in the monster's fangs. Then he finally lost his last bit of self-control, and the reins fell from his hand. The horses, when they felt the reins suddenly became loose, ran free. They dashed up high in heaven and then down almost to the earth. The cloud began to smoke as the mountain tops burned with fire. Fields dried from heat everywhere. Plants, trees, and flowers began to burn. 3 times Poseidon raised his head above the waves and shook his trident at Phaeton. Each time, the sea god had to dive back underwater to escape the heat. Phaeton saw the world on fire and felt the intolerable heat. The air he breathed was like the air of the furnace. Smoke made everything dark. He didn't know where the chariots were flying to next. Finally, Gaia, Mother Earth, called out to her grandson Zeus to stop the destruction. "O ruler of the gods," she cried, "if I have done and deserve to die by fire, why you do not kill me with your thunderbolts? Let me at least die by your hand. If you do not care about me, what has the ocean done to deserve such a fate? Save what still remains from the devouring flame of the sun." Then Zeus called the other gods to him, including Apollo. He told them all was lost and that he did something. Then he climbed the tallest tower of his palace and picked up a lightning bolt in his right hand. With a mighty throw, Zeus launched it against Phaeton. The boy was struck dead from the chariot and fell like a shooting star to the earth below. His body landed in the river Eridanus, whose waters cooled his burning corpse. The nymphs who lived along this river built a tomb for the poor boy and wrote these words on a stone: "Driver of Apollo's chariot, Phaeton, struck by Zeus' lightning, rests beneath the stone. He could not rule his father's car of fire, but was it noble for him to try?
Hi there! Orpheus and Eurydice story. Orpheus was another son of Apollo. As a boy, Orpheus was given a lyre by his father, who taught him to play it. The boy was an excellent pupil. Soon he could play it so well that no one could resist the charm of his music. So sweet was Orpheus' music that even wild beasts would forget their fierceness. When Orpheus grew into manhood, he married the beautiful Eurydice. The young couple was very much in love. However, soon after the wedding, a young shepherd named Aristaeus saw Eurydice walking alone in the field. The shepherd was attracted by her beauty, and he called out to her. Eurydice was afraid of his intention, and she ran away. In her haste, she stepped on a poisonous snake and was bitten on her bare foot. She lay when Odysseus came and found her. Odysseus' grief was overwhelming. He picked up his lyre and sang about his love for Eurydice and the sadness in heart. All who heard him were moved to tears, but none could help him. Odysseus decided to look for his wife in Hades. He descended into the underworld and sang his way past Cerberus, the fierce three-headed dog who guarded the gates. Finally, he arrived before the throne of Hades. There he sang his grief and his desire to the Lord of the Dead. O deity of the underworld, sang Odysseus, all his play his lyre. To you all who live must come. Hear my words, for they are true. Love has led me here. I beg you to restore the life of my dear Eurydice. Destiny will lead us all here to your kingdom sooner or later, but my wife came too soon. We will return when she has lived a full life, but until then, I beg you, let her be mine. If you deny me this, then I cannot return alone. I will die here now, and you have us both. And Odysseus sang these tender words. The way goes shed tears. Hades himself could not resist the feeling pity for the young man. Hades called for Eurydice. She was among the newly arrived ghosts, limping with her wounded foot. Hades permitted Odysseus to take her away one condition. Odysseus was told he could not look at his wife until they had left the underworld and reached the surface of the earth. Odysseus sang his gratitude, and the reunited couple began their journey. Odysseus led, and Eurydice followed. They passed through passages dark and steep, in total silence, until they had nearly reached the cheerful upper world. Then Odysseus forgot his promise to Hades and looked back to make sure his wife was following. Instantly, Eurydice's spirit was taken away back to the underworld. She barely had time to stretch her arms out to her husband, and then she was gone. Dying a second time, she said, "Farewell, my love." But the sound was almost lost to Odysseus' ears. Odysseus tried to follow her and begged Charon to take him across the river. The ferryman refused and told him to go back. For 7 days, Odysseus stayed near the entrance to the underworld without food or any sleep. Odysseus sang about his grief and the cruelty of Hades. His music melted the hearts of nearby beasts and mighty oak trees. He ignored the local maidens who tried to attract him away from his grief. In fact, his bitter words against him, so that they leave him alone. One day, drunk with wine, one of these maidens spotted Odysseus who was still playing his bridler. "See there," she shouted to her companions. "There is the one who despises us." As she yelled this word, she threw her spear at Oreus. The weapon flew straight at the grieving husband. But as soon as it came with the sound of the lyre, it fell harmlessly to the ground. So did the stone the other woman threw at Oreus. Then the woman began to scream madly, and then the noise from their throat overcame to the sound of the lyre. This broke Oreus' spell. As soon his blood ran freely from the stone the crazed woman threw at him, he had to stop playing, and the mad woman tore his body to pieces. They threw his head and his bladder into the river. Downriver, Oreus' aunts found his remains, and they buried him at the Libethra. It is said that the nightingale sings more sweetly over his grave than anyone else in Greece. His lyre was taken by Zeus and placed among the stars, where it's from the constellation Lyra. Odysseus' spirit passed a second time over the river into Hades. He found Eurydice and embraced her with eager arms. They wander happily in the underworld now. Sometimes he leads and she follows, and sometimes it's the other way around. Odysseus looked lovingly on her always and no longer fears punishment for doing so. Thank you. And that's it for today. Thank you for listening. Hope you enjoyed our story. Bye!
Bye.